Greetings! It is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! It is time for a continued discussion on various anime series where I review them for you and let them know how you can use them in your big eye, small mouth games. A couple of suggestions on how you can adapt these easily to this role-playing game system, which can work in many other role-playing game systems also. But let's dive in today. I have two more series from 2014 and then two series from this current season of anime. Let's start with the two from 2014, of course, with Mekaku City Actors and Hamatora. Let's start with Hamatora. So with Hamatora, we focus on a 17-year-old boy named Nice, who happens to run his own detective agency, his own PI agency. He's partnered with a man named Hajime. They're in a world where there's a number of people with supernatural abilities called minimum holders. The two of them are minimum holders. Minimum holders tend to go to this academy, this special place that was made for them, Facilitas Academy. Minimum holders are effectively kept relatively secret by the government. Most people don't know about them. And Nice and Hajime, along with a number of others that make up the detective agency, go on various missions, take care of various crimes, sometimes that involve minimum holders, sometimes that just involve more unique things, facing various mysteries. This does include an overarching theme of a serial killer who's targeting minimum holders. But let's talk about the genres from this one. It's an action. They sometimes have to get in fights with other minimum holders, take them out, use their abilities. It's also a mystery. They have to deal with very mysterious circumstances along some of the crimes they face, especially when they get into the more overarching ones, such as with the serial killer. It's also a supernatural. They have supernatural abilities. Each of them has a unique ability based upon their, well, minimum. Now I rate this one a 4. It was a fairly good one, and I did enjoy it, and there are 2 seasons of it. Really, the one I was talking about here was the second season, but you can I would check out the first one and then go into the second one. Second one's a little bit more complex and a little bit more mysterious, I would say, so be warned on that. Now, if you're using an BESM game, I would recommend 350 points. You're going to make your characters a team of minimum users running a detective agency. Now, whether this is connected to Nice and his friends, or you're your own thing, completely up to your game master. Your players might have some say in that one. Effectively, all of you will be going on various, well, detective missions. Going on little things there you get jobs to do. These might involve minimum holders. They might not involve minimum holders. You could have more major cases like dealing with things like serial killers or other things that you might get either related to the cops, basically working with them, or even hired on by them in particular to help them out. It will be completely up to your game master the exact level of what PI work your characters will be doing and how it relates to minimum holders or not. All of them just have that ability and can use them. Now let's move on and talk about Mekaku City Actors. Shintaro is an 18-year-old NEET. He doesn't ever leave his house. It's been like years since he's left. But an incident where he spills stuff on his keyboard and he needs to do stuff and he can't get a keyboard right away. He doesn't have replacement. Forces him to finally leave his house after all this time. So he leaves his house. He heads to a major apartment store where he can finally buy a new keyboard. And some people take everyone there hostage, him included. He ends up getting saved by these group of younger people that call themselves Mekakushi Dan. Effectively, each of them has these mysterious supernatural eye-based powers that they can use to save him. And it turns out that he has some abilities of his own that they invite him to join him, more force him to join them, and then they go off on their various events and adventures that are going on. And there are technically 3 endings to this series. 2 that were more specific to the original material, and 1 that was added in as part of the anime. Noting that, just to get rid of a little bit of the confusion you might have when you're watching through it. 3 endings. Try to kind of understand how they separate out. So the genres of this one are action. They sometimes get into fights using their eye powers, battling against various enemies and opponents that can kind of occur and oppose their group. It's supernatural. They have supernatural abilities using their eyes that seem to be all based around this eye-based power. It also is tragedy. A lot of dark stuff has happened to all of them in their pasts. Terrible things that not only seem to drive their ability to awaken their powers, but also to drive their own misfortune in a life that they bond together with to attempts to overcome. I rate this one a 4. Close to a 3, only because of the little bit of confusion that even I had when it came to the way the narrative story flowed, because there is technically 3 endings to this that we kind of hit on at various points in the back end of the series, and it's a little confusing at times too. It took me a bit to pick up a lot of the materials from it. That's the only reason I probably don't rate it higher, and I do kind of... I'm tempted to put it as a 3, because otherwise it's a very interesting series with a very interesting premise. If you're using this in a BESM game, I recommend 300 points. You're going to make your group of characters a group of people in a group like Mekaku Dan. They will have eye powers and be united together in a way that is comforting each other from the various problems in their own lives, but they're also going to face against the basically legacy of the fact that they have these powers, dealing with these powers and dealing with problems that maybe arise from having it, while still sort of uniting together against the various threats that might be out there against them as a group or as individuals that they're banding together to overcome. Along the way, you'll also seek to recruit new folks, find folks that will be able to help you out or go with you on various things, basically shoring up their numbers to what they need to overcome any problem, both personal and as a group. Let's talk about, though, the 2 from this season, Centaur no Nayami and the Classroom of the Elite. I would attempt to say this in its Japanese form, but I will butcher it because I know myself. So, I will be nice enough this time not to butcher it. But let's start with the Classroom of the Elite, the English title here. So in the not-too-distant future, Japan establishes a special school system, basically to bring students into it and to make incredibly productive members of society who support the country as a whole, to make people better suited for leading the country. We focus on a student, Kyotoka, who is within the Class D, the inferior students, basically the bottom of the rung within this even group here, and they're treated that way. Turns out he probably could be in one of the higher classes, but for various own personal problems and the way he acts, he is down here in this class. And he meets other students within the class who help to basically change the way he looks at the world and change himself. Turns out Class D is less maybe for grades, and maybe for those people that just have such problems that they're left driven into the situation because of these problems. So there's a lot more than just grades on the line that's driving them into Class D. Our protagonists here included. So the genres of this one are, of course, slice of life. We're focusing on normal lives of these students, and they're traveling through life itself. It's also a school because we focus on their school life more than anything. Then it's a drama after that. We have a lot of dramatic moments and the own problems of each of these students that you can kind of see as to why they might be just a little bit more flawed and not have been as successful within the school. You can kind of notice and pick up on it. I also do rate this one a 4. It's a pretty interesting premise for one, and the characters are very connectable, and relatable is one of those things. They have very relatable problems that can draw you into being interesting about them attempting to fix it with each other in a way, that their own bonds with each other are attempting to overcome it. Now, if using this in BESM game, I would recommend 200 points. You're going to make your characters members of Class D, and each of them will be in there for their own reasons, and it's going to be your characters attempting to live their lives in here and maybe increase their station, try to find a way to overcome whatever reason they're in Class D. Perhaps together, perhaps on their own, but using the relationships they'll be building with each other in order to attempt to better themselves. And better themselves in such a way that maybe they'll move out of this class into another one and prove themselves better people overall. They'll have to deal with what's expected of them from the school, from society, and maybe even the prejudices of other classes that are going to be used against them. So there will be these overwhelming forces kind of driving them in certain areas that it's going to be up to them to manage those, manage themselves, and push themselves forward. Now let's move on and talk about Centaur no Nayami. So this focuses on a world where evolution of humanity took a vastly different path than it did with us. Basically, humanity split off into a number of almost sub-races that resemble mythological creatures. So you have centaurs, satyrs, things that look like angels, devils, mermaids, many different types of races that make up what would be humanity. We focus on this world on a centaur girl called Himiko, and effectively her daily life as she goes to school. She deals with her friends and families, meets new people, meets interesting people from various other cultures and from across the world, as it reflects not only this level of cultural inclusion that would be similar to our own of finding new people from different places, but it also adds these levels of prejudices and information based on the fact of the different races and how they've basically gotten along with each other all over these many, many years. So the genres for this one, slice of life. We're seeing the daily lives of these characters and just observing them. It's also a comedy. They do lots of funny and silly little things, and they get into incidents which are just, they shouldn't have gotten into in the first place. Also, to a degree, it's a supernatural. There are unusual they're all basically kind of mythological creatures. There is this level of, underlying almost supernatural nature to it without being forthright supernatural nature. It's a very interesting sort of line that you almost feel like it is, though you don't see a lot, which really throws it to the forefront. It's a lot of little things which hint on the supernatural nature of this series, beyond just the fact that all of them look different. And this one a 4. It's been an interesting one to see because the basic plot line seems so simple or seems so weird, but you might dismiss it. It's some of the underlying themes that I've found very interesting that they can bring in on some of the discussions they have and things they talk about, things that are basically encountered in course of the series that make it a little more unique and interesting. Though, again, all these series, they can always have something that's just kind of silly. If you're using this BESM game, I'd recommend 200 points. You're going to make your characters just a group of students going to school somewhere. Whether Japan, whether somewhere else, you're going to have them deal with, effectively, all the different races, various racial prejudices and tensions that are, in modern society, attempting to overcome, but some may still exist there. There might be old traditions which are there, which might interfere with certain things or make things just unusual that you're going to have to deal with too. There's a lot based upon this entire thing that will make it that interesting to play, even though it's seemingly such a normal world. It's the character's uniqueness in a normal world, and maybe facing problems that reflect a different sort of world than our own, but mimic it so much that your characters are going to overcome, which will be the interest of it. Characters of two different races, getting along, having fun, doing something, and ancient prejudices between those two races might be a theme that you could easily do, that proving those wrong when it compares to some things in society, but yet it's different. That might be the interest of it. Interest of this game that you're going to be doing with it. But that's it for today. So I introduced you to 4 more anime series, let you know a little bit about them, and of course gave you suggestions how to use them in BESM game. You can use them in other role-playing game systems. I have given you suggestions for the settings themselves. It will be completely up to you how to adapt them for character building or world building, the basic rules that you're going to be using in order to create this game system. It'll be that character building and any related things that will come about of character building, which is going to be the hardest part of it. But if you think there's a world setting, a world system that works better with this, go ahead and use it. There are plenty out there that might work better for you. But if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I left out, please just leave in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel, the Empire, the work I do. If you want to show some extra support, you can always check out my Patreon, link in the description below. There's some great rewards there, helps to grow and improve the channel and the Empire. But regardless, Until the next time, I bid you farewell.